All right, so we're going to go ahead and begin. So thank you for joining us for this evening's event. My name is Nick, and I'm one of the event's hosts here at Powell's Books in Portland, Oregon. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to check out our lineup of upcoming virtual events by visiting our website at powells.com. If you don't do so already, please follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Tonight, we are thrilled to welcome Saïd Sayrafiezadeh and David Adjmi. Saïd Sayrafiezadeh was born in Brooklyn and raised in Pittsburgh. He is the author of a memoir, When Skateboards Will Be Free, and a story collection, Brief Encounters with the Enemy. He is the recipient of a Whiting Award and a Coleman Center Fellowship. His writing has appeared in The New Yorker, The Paris Review, Granta, the New York Times Magazine, and McSweeney's. He teaches at New York University and Hunter College and lives in New York City. Sayrafiezadeh's new collection of stories, American Estrangement, is set in a contemporary America full of the kind of emotionally bruised characters familiar readers of Denis Johnson and George Saunders. Familiar to readers. These are people contending with internal struggles, a son's fractured relationship with his father, the death of a mother, the loss of a job, drug addiction, even as they are battered by larger, often invisible economic, political, and racial forces of American society. Searing, intimate, often slyly funny, and always marked by a deep imaginative sympathy, American Estrangement is a testament to our addled times and will cement Sayrafiezadeh's reputation as one of the essential 21st century American writers. Joining Sayrafiezadeh in conversation this evening is David Adjmi. Adjmi was called virtuosic by the New York Times, and he was named as the top 10 in culture of the 2012 by the New Yorker. He is the recipient of a Guggenheim, the Steinberg Playwright Award, and the Whiting Award, and the Kessel Ring Prize, among others. His plays have been produced at theaters such as Lincoln Center, RSC, Steppenwolf, and Soho Rep. His new play, The Stumble, is a commission from Lincoln Center Theater, and he was recently excerpted in the Paris Review. David's acclaimed memoir, Lot 6, was recently published by HarperCollins, and his two play collections, Stunning and Other Plays, and 1789, 1978, Marie Antoinette, and 3C are published by TCG. So this evening's event will include an audience Q&A. So please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen if you would like to ask a question, as well as if someone has typed a question that you'd also like to know the answer to, please upvote that particular question by clicking the thumbs up button. Most importantly, please consider supporting Saïd and Powell's by purchasing a copy of his new story collection from us. A link to buy American Estrangement, along with David's books, will be shared in the chat a couple times tonight. So Saïd and David, welcome. We're thrilled to have you both.
Thank you so much, and we're thrilled to be here.
Nick, thank you for that intro. Fantastic.
Yeah, I feel very fancy. I feel like we're both in a fancy place right now.
We are.
First of all, Saïd, I am so happy that you asked me to do this because I wrote something for your book, like, I don't know, 6 months ago, whatever it was. And I remember writing it, and it kept getting longer and longer and longer because I was getting so fixated on the book, and there was so much I wanted to talk about. And now I finally have a chance to unpack more of the book and my own excitement about it, because I think the book is thrilling, and I really, really, truly love it so much.
Well, thank you.
I think that's an achievement.
Thank you, bud. I appreciate it. I appreciate you doing this. You're in LA, I'm in New York. We've got people from around the world here zooming in with us. I just want to say hi to them because I did notice that I've got some former students. My wife is here watching, so we're going to put on a good show for them. So thanks for doing this, David.
Oh my God, it's my pleasure. So okay, let's
hit me with some curveballs. Let's do it. Let's make matches.
All right, man. This is it. It's happening. So this book is so. I just read it for the third time because I read it twice last year. And then I read it again. And I did think I was going to be annoyed to have to read it again. Actually, I was like, oh, I'm not going to like it. This time I'm going to like it less. It's going to be diminishing returns.
This is going to be the hate read. But third time's the hate read.
Like, I have to read it because I have to prepare for this reading. But actually, it really, it does leave me with a very specific feeling every time I read it. It's sort of the same. It's kind of like a queasy sort of, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's a sick, aching feeling, but in a great way, but in a way that feels pleasurable. It's so funny, this book, to me. I find some of it laugh out loud funny, although it's bone dry. And I want to talk about the tone later, but but there's something so unnerving about it. And I think part of what makes it so unnerving is that there is like a trauma at the center of the book or something, and it's palpable. Maybe trauma is not the right word, but something like a trauma. But the narrators of these stories can't quite access what's going on with them. So the anxiety or the pain or the ache at the core of the stories gets so diffuse. And then you are left with this weird, unlocatable tension or feeling. And there's this crazy, and the cumulative power of the stories, because sometimes books of short stories don't accumulate. And I think the thing about this book is that they do accumulate, even though they're so wildly disparate, some of them, because some of them are dystopian and some of them are like, you know, they sort of all angle a different way, but I just marvel at that. So I guess my first question for you is a craft thing of like, how do you craft a short story? Like, how do you, and it's sort of a double prong question, like, how do you produce that tension? And how much of it is deliberate and how much of it is crafted, and also how do you build a series of stories into a book so that it accretes? I just asked you 20 questions, so
yeah,
sorry.
No,
okay.
I love it. So and you know how it is as a writer, fellow writer, we're not always able to articulate everything, and and what I want to do, and maybe this isn't the form, because I want to ask you, how do you craft a play? That's the real question. But so with the stories, the tension, you know, you said something earlier. You said, how did you phrase it? You said the characters, there's trauma, but they can't locate it. Is that how you put it? Something like that. I'm paraphrasing. And I think that's there's like an unspoken something. And isn't that how life is though? Like we don't always know, or most of the time we don't know what the hell's going on with us or what's going on in the world or why we're bothered or what's troubling us. So I think that's kind of a heartbeat in all of them. But craft-wise, I think what I try to do in my stories, one thing, and David, you know, I used to be an actor. I'm a failed actor. I also wanted to be a playwright. I'm a failed playwright. All of that to say that I spent many, many years in the theater, on stage, and I lived in fear of boring the audience. I had lived in fear of the audience, a live audience, taking their eyes off of me on the stage. So I think I took that kind of drive. I'm putting it in my stories. I'm trying to keep the reader's attention. I'm trying to figure out constantly, how do I keep the reader's attention? When do I give the reader a certain amount of information? I'll give you an example. Let's just go to the first story. The first story is called Audition, and the opening line is, here, let me quote myself. I'm going to read my opening line. The opening line is, hang on, wait for it. The opening line is, the first time I smoked crack cocaine was the spring I worked construction for my father on his new subdivision in Moonlight Heights. So that's the opening line.
It's such a great sentence.
Good, thank you. And it took me a while to come up with that. So, and then what I do is then I cut away. I cut away from it, and it's like 5 pages. So the reader knows crack cocaine is going to figure into this narrator's life, but now the reader has to wait for it. That's my way of saying, here's how I can kind of keep the reader's attention while I go through a big, long setup. The setup's like 5 or 6 pages, but I feel like I have at least the reader sort of like, I've got their interest and they're waiting. They're waiting for the thing to happen. They're waiting for the action to happen. So that's a little bit of something of how I craft some of these stories. I think there's a couple other ones that kind of follow a similar format. What else? What else am I missing? What else did you say?
But like, but the
go.
thing that it's just haunting me because I keep reading this book and feeling this same feeling at the end. And I'm sort of going, how did he do this? Like, because I often can't point to what's going on. Sometimes, I mean, there are stories where it's the traumatic kernel is buried, but it's apparent. But there are other stories where it's oblique, but you feel it.
Yeah.
And I guess, and so I'm talking about the heartbeat of these stories because they're so unusual in terms of how they work on the reader. And I'm just wondering, how does that, I mean, I know, I know, but I have to ask these questions. That's what I'm the interlocutor.
That's what we're here
I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask,
Let's
and
do it.
You can refuse to answer. You can refuse to answer anything I say.
Senator, I do not recall. Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
No, but I want to know how you did that. I just want to know was it conscious or just an accident?
No, listen, I like to think everything I do is conscious. Everything I do is conscious. But then of course there's stuff that happens that I wasn't. So, okay, now I'm going to contradict myself. Of course, there's going to be stuff as artists when we're writing that are happy accidents we didn't necessarily intend, but we'll take it. You know, if I'm not answering the question, then you stop me. But I think one of the things I try to do is a lot. Hey, what did you say you felt like when you read? You said you felt like you kind of feel like shit. Huh?
I felt like I felt queasy. And I felt disquieted, and I felt existential dread and horror, a la Sartre's nausea.
Yeah.
But with a little bit of like, I felt happy about it, sort of.
Well,
it's a really hard feeling to describe. Yeah, it's a hard feeling to describe.
And that's what I'm actually. I like that you're saying that because that's kind of my worldview. So I'm glad that it's coming across on the page. But I think also,
okay, good.
I think. Some of it is that I try to bring some humor into it. You know, I think the short story form, at least for me, is like I take like a really big issue. I take a problem. I take something that's unresolvable. And then I've got to shrink it into 6,000 words. So in some ways, I might be biting off way more than I can chew. And I got to compress it. And I'm wondering if some of that is what causes the feelings that you're talking about, because it's like, and the thing is too, like when I say they're unresolvable, none of these stories, I don't think there's no real resolution at any of these stories. They kind of all just like, they just like fall off the cliff. It just kind of like ends. We're like going,
which is great. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like you're driving 60 miles and then it's just like suddenly car's gone, you stop, that's it. You turn the page, no, we're done with that. So listen, there's a lot of sadness in them, no question. I write from a place of sadness, but I'm also trying to cut it a little bit with humor, so it doesn't get too overwhelming. So then maybe part of like when you say you're feeling sickened, but you know, there's like I'm giving a little bit of sugar in with the medicine. Humor is important for me in my writing, that we don't get too maudlin. There's like a bell that goes off. It's like, oh no, we're getting a little too sad, too maudlin. Let's happy it up. And then we can go back, try to change the levels. So
I never find this maudlin. There's nothing maudlin about your writing. I want to talk about the tone later because I'm so intrigued by it. But I want to talk about this compression thing you just said. So are you saying that you write in such a way where you're sort of, there's too much stuff and then you have to actually shrink it down? Is that what you're sort of saying? And that, but that because you have to compress so much stuff, are you eliding thing? Like you can't possibly fit it all in there because it feels like that. It feels that way. Like there's there's worlds, like it's like a bonsai tree. You could just drop some water and it suddenly explodes into something else.
Hey, I want to go back to the playwriting thing for a minute. No, because listen, I wrote a play when I didn't know how to write a play, and I wrote a play, and David, it was like over 200 pages long. And I remember I was working with this director, and she said, you've got to cut this. She said, and she's like, we're trying for an evening of theater. And right. And I was like, oh, I had never thought that there were parameters. I thought we just do whatever, like we're artists, we go as far as we need to go. That for me, there was a parameter. So it actually was helpful. So I've got the 6,000 words. I got to get in fast. I've got to get into the story fast. I've got to, you know, I digress, but I got to give you another, here's a song analogy. And I just read about this, and I'm not a musician, so I'm going to probably screw this all up. But there was a piece in the Times about how pop song structures are actually changing because of the way music is being distributed now. Everybody's streaming it. That musicians now, they have the hooks. They begin it with the hook. Okay, say what you want, but shit, that's the reality. So for me, I've got 6,000 words. I've got to get in fast. I can't waste time. Everything's got to be there for a purpose. If there's a prop, if there's a watch in the scene, there's got to be a purpose for that, a real purpose. Maybe it'll come back around again. I'm aware of like introducing things and seeing how much I can milk it for.
Yeah.
If I was writing a novel, I imagine I wouldn't need to worry about that so much. Okay, but I like that I have to worry about it. It's the challenge for me. It's the challenge. And one other thing I always want to add is I don't know if I necessarily go in knowing I'm biting off more than I can chew in 6,000 words, but I realize at some point often that I have. There's a few stories in here in particular that happened in where I went, oh my God, I'm at the 4,000th word, and I've got to start figuring out a way to get the hell out of this story. What's my exit strategy? It lights a little bit of fire under me. So yeah, some of that's all kind of in the mix of them.
But what about I mean, you went from writing this 200-page, which by the way, my new play is 200 pages. But anyways, I digress.
But see, someone like you can do that. You're a star, you can get away with it. Yes.
Oh, please. Okay, so no, but I want to ask this question. Yeah. Why are you writing? Because your first book was a memoir, right? Yes. And that was your first book.
Yes, right.
And then you moved to short stories. And so I'm just sort of wondering what about the form appeals to you, and why did you not like a novel if you wanted to try fiction?
Exhausted after the memoir. Easy answer was I was exhausted after the memoir. I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had never really written fiction before, so that wasn't even a twinkle in my eye, David. I wasn't even thinking fiction, and I felt like, what was I going to do? Write another memoir? I didn't know. I was like, okay, now I'll write a memoir about writing the memoirs. Am I going to be one of those kinds of writers? You know, I was like, what's the material? I knew, you know, my memoir is about a certain part of my life. It's not every single thing that happened to me. So there were things that I had not. Oh, that was a question you asked. Do I take things? You said, do I lie? So there were things that I didn't put in the memoir. There are things that I didn't put in the memoir that I felt like those are interesting things to write about. And I felt like, you know, there were still things I wanted to say autobiographically. I don't know if a personal essay would have been the right way to go. Definitely another memoir wouldn't have been for me. And I think what it was just kind of like my psychological makeup at the time was, let me do something that seemed manageable, a short story. I could see the finish. You can see the fucking finish line right when you start. You know what I mean? It's like, as bad as much work as it's going to be, it's only going to be a few thousand words. So you can still see it. Having said that, these take me a long time to write, man. These take me.
How long did it take you? How long did the whole thing take?
These take me months. They take me months to write.
Did you write them all? Like, how long was the whole, from start to finish? How long did it take?
No, I mean, well, the first story in this book I wrote way back in 2014. So there's that, and then, you know, and then I wrote others as the years went on. I wrote a few. This couple, I can't remember quite the chronology of it, but they take. Now listen, I'm not saying I'm sitting down writing 8 hours a day. But over, it's a cumulative work. I stay with these stories. Some of these stories were originally turned down by magazines, and in which they gave me notes on of things that weren't working. And then it took me a long time to figure out how to change it, how to fix it, how to.
Were the notes helpful?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. No, I'm always. Listen, I can only take notes from certain people. I know I don't know how you are as a writer. I don't know if you're giving your play to everybody, but for me, I can't have too many voices in my head. The main voice I have in my head is my wife, who's not a writer, and that's so great. That's the best, because she doesn't have an agenda. She doesn't have like, here's what literature should be. You know what I mean? She's just like, because that's how I'd be an asshole if I was reading someone's work. Like, you're not living up to the. But she reads as a reader, and she'll just tell me like, I was bored up until she told. Here's a note she gave me directly once. I was bored until page 9.
Right.
And then so there's two things I can do. I can be pissed off and mad and like say, you don't know, you're not getting what I'm doing, or I can try to take in what she's saying. And I ended up cutting those first 9 pages, and it made the story work. So yes, when I get notes back from editors, I take those notes very seriously. I went back, I reworked the story, and it took a while. It was away for a while, and I took it back out and kind of trying to change the framing of it. I changed the framing of it. But these things take time, man. Writing takes time for me.
But it really pays off in this book, because the exactitude of the prose is so, I mean, honestly, I think it's magnificent. So that's what I'm going to say.
Hey, by the way, I want to say, and that's one of the issues, is I spend so fucking long on the sentences. I spend so long on the sentences. Like, I read that opening line right now. It was like, that took a while to come up with. And I also want to I spend long on the sentences, and I also don't want it to seem like I've spent a long time.
It doesn't. It totally doesn't. It doesn't. Nothing felt overworked. Nothing in this book feels overworked. It is such a pleasure to read it. And the stories they're just hypnotic. I don't know how else to describe it. Can you read?
Yes.
I can't remember if we decide. You read it. Okay, so read a little bit.
I'll read. I'd love to read.
Yeah, I think they'll like it. And I'll just be quiet.
All right, so listen, but as a former actor, I don't have my audience in front of me, but you people who are out in Zoom land, I'm with you, you're with me. So I won't be able to feed off of your energy, but I'm getting it through my iPad. Okay, so this one's called Fairground. This is in the middle of the book, and it needs no introduction. And I'll just read which I read for like 40, 45 minutes a day. What do you think?
Yeah, please, like 2 hours.
Right, that's okay.
Yeah.
So here we go. Fairground. I've only been to one hanging in my life, and that was when I was 6 or 7 years old, or maybe I was 8, but who can really remember that far back with complete accuracy? This also happened to be during the period when the city was being rezoned. Sector A, now Sector G now Sector Q and R, and so on, thanks to the mayor who'd won by a landslide. It was going to take a while for everyone to get used to the changes, but everyone agreed that it would be worth it in the end. Sometimes when I was out walking with my mom, we would pass a row of school buses lined up like ducks at the crosswalk, waiting for the light to turn green, the faces of the secured populations looking through the windows with indifference and resignation, as if they'd been traveling for weeks across the country rather than hours across the city. They would be crammed into the buses, children too, twice as many as the bus could comfortably hold, their belongings piled on their laps, often higher than their heads, suitcases, backpacks, lamps without lampshades. If you could carry it, you could bring it. That was the directive. That seemed fair. Don't stare, my mother would say. It's not polite. What I do remember for sure is that I'd been taken to the hanging as something of an afternoon diversion by Mr. Montgomery, my stepfather, the first stepfather in a sequence of several, and with full consent of my mother, who considered the outing a good opportunity for me to bond with a man I'd just met a few weeks earlier. You'll learn to love him, she told me, an upbeat prediction that, as far as I could see, was based on very little evidence. The day trip with Mr. Montgomery had also been a way for my mother to have some alone time so she could study for her upcoming exam, because this also happened to be during that period when she'd gone back to school, mid-30s, trying to do something different with her life, something meaningful, and become a librarian. If all went well, she'd soon be able to get us out of our apartment above the nail salon where we'd been living for a year, and where the scent of nail polish would waft up through the vents between the hours of 10 and 6. I thought it smelled nice, and my mother thought it smelled annoying, and eventually we were so used to it that we no longer smelled it at all. She told me that she'd take me downstairs one of these days so that I could have my nails painted at half price being one of the perks of living above a nail salon. Think about what color you want, she'd said. What colors do they have? They have every color. Then I want blue, I said. You have to dream bigger than that, she said. She listed colors I hadn't known were colors. Orange, cream, dream, tiger blossom, tickle my heart, Timberland violet. Tiger blossom, I said. Good choice, she said. Seeing Mr. Montgomery and me off on that fall afternoon, she'd stood in the doorway of our apartment, Dewey Decibel study guide under her arm, telling us, have fun, boys. Oh, we will, Mr. Montgomery had said. But the prospect of an outing with me had apparently made Mr. Montgomery contemplative, unexpectedly so. And he'd sat in the parked car for a while, saying nothing, hands on the wheel, key in the ignition, motor off, gazing through the windshield at I knew not what. I'd sat there, too, wondering if we were having car trouble. Finally, he turned to me, eyes moist, saying how it had just occurred to him right then, how he was passing the tradition downward. Do you know what I'm talking about, son? He'd asked. No, I didn't. Yes, I do, I said. He seemed moved by this. He rubbed the back of my neck with something like fondness. The sensation was unfamiliar, but pleasant. According to Mr. Montgomery, when he'd been a boy about my age, 6, 7, or 8, he'd been taken to this very first execution by his father, as had his father before him, and so on down the generational line, great, 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 grand. I was dubious that Mr. Montgomery had ever been a boy my age, let alone a boy at all, but he appeared to remember the past with emotion. Like yesterday, he told me. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. The back of his hand looked old. This was what fathers did with sons, he said. This was what I would one day do with my sons. He spoke with confidence and assertion. I understand, Mr. Montgomery, I said. You don't have to call me Mr. Montgomery, he said. I won't, I said. He wanted me to call him by his first name, William, or one of the variations thereof. You can call me Will or Willie, he said. You can call me Bill or Billy. It was an hour to the fairground, and the reminiscences were going to make us late. He leaned forward in his seat as if doing so made the car go faster. Through the windshield, the scenery of the city passed by at an alarming rate, occasionally broken by a flash of white space where trees and grass had been eliminated, and where we could briefly glimpse the towering snow-capped mountain beyond which lay the next city. Frankly, I didn't know what my mother saw in Mr. Montgomery. They seemed to have nothing in common, beginning with the fact that Mr. Montgomery's primary experience in a public library had been to use the public bathroom. I needed to pee bad, he'd said. I didn't find this funny, but he and my mother sure did, and they told the anecdote jointly and often, interpreting the distance that separated them on the compatibility index as something that strengthened their bond rather than a troubling indicator that they were wrong for each other. Still, the first time I'd met Mr. Montgomery had been for dinner at Applebee's, which had been a promising start. I'd worn slacks and my mother had worn lipstick. They'd sat side by side in the big burgundy booth, and I'd sat across from them as if they were interviewing me for a job, everyone's hands folded politely on the table. Mr. Montgomery had told me that I could order anything I wanted off the menu, and this added to the air of promise. Sky's the limit, he'd said. He was showing off for my mother. He's going to learn to love you, my mother had said to him. I knew he was trying to curry favor with me. I knew he knew I was the lone obstacle for him being able to sleep with my mother. So I ordered the most expensive thing off the menu. Why not? The double glazed baby back ribs, which I'd never heard of before. Apparently, this was the wrong choice. Don't be presumptuous, my mother said. How about the mac and cheese, Mr. Montgomery said. He was referring me to the children's menu. So I acquiesced and ordered the typical child's fare, chicken fingers and French fries. Why not get a milkshake to go with that, Mr. Montgomery said, trying to prove that he was actually easygoing with money. Yummy, my mother said. No, I said. We arrived at the fairground with barely time to spare. The parking lot was filled to capacity and people were streaming through the big white gate above which read Sector N welcomes you to the city fairground. Soon this would have to be changed to Sector V. Mr. Montgomery drove around looking for an empty spot, cursing, going in circles, apologizing for cursing, talking philosophically about how this was everyone else's fault, that this was what happened when you stopped paying attention. Big crowds, little sensitivity, no parking. Everything is connected, son, he said. Yes, he was happy that the turnout was good because good turnout meant there was civic pride, but civic pride comes at a cost, he said. Back in my day, he extemporized about the past. I said nothing. Do you know what I'm talking about? He said. He didn't wait for an answer. Suddenly he turned to me. There's going to be blood today, son, he said, as if we were only now realizing what this excursion was all about. Are you okay with blood? He asked. He sounded concerned. He sounded as if he were prepared to turn the car around if I had answered no. I wanted to be okay with blood, but I wasn't so sure. I still had scabs on my knees from a few weeks earlier when my mother had tried to teach me how to ride a bicycle. And just when I was getting the hang of it, I'd crashed into the sidewalk. My mother had comforted me briefly, sweetly, cradling me in her lap. And two women from the nail salon had come over wearing aprons, smelling of polish. You have to get right back on, honey, they'd said. I like blood, sir, I told Mr. Montgomery. He liked that I liked blood. Good boy, he said. You don't have to call me sir. All right, and that's where I'll end. And the good folks out there have got, this is how you got to buy the book to see what happens. See what happens with that story. Okay.
Holy cow. I mean, I'm getting the feeling again. I'm getting my sick feeling that this story is like so harrowing to me. And it's so weird because it's also so tender. Like Mr. Montgomery is so, and it's so good that it's so tender. Like the moments of tenderness are harrowing. It's a very strange confluence of emotions.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, isn't that how humans are?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're all full of those contradictions.
But that's why it's so. But the precision of those moments, and there's so much also generosity that you show these characters who are so difficult in a way. I mean, Mr. Montgomery is freaks me out. But then also, Mr. Montgomery also broke my heart. So anyway, there's something in that book. It's so, I mean, in that story, I'm sorry, where the boy is talking about blood, right? And he's saying, oh, do you want to see blood? Do you want to see blood? Do you like blood? And then after it's over, there's no blood. Right. And he says, what do you mean? I thought there was blood. And he said, no, that's it. I was being figurative. And there's a whole thing in this book. That's right. And it's I have to talk about it, about literal and figurative. It goes throughout the entire book.
That's right. There's that line you pointed. I remember. Yes.
Right. Well, there's that line, right, where the mother says, you know, the mother's getting jobs in a building and she's moving up to different floors, and the son thinks, oh, she's moving up literally and figuratively. And she says,
career-wise.
No. Right. Correct. She's like, no, just literally. But in this book, figurative and anything that has to do with figurative, anything abstract, anything with art or language and the way letters make up a word, you know, there's something in this book that becomes a source of anxiety. And that's something that became very apparent to me reading it. It's not like, and it's so interesting because writers usually do the opposite, right? It's like, you know, To the Lighthouse of Lily Briscoe with her painting, slashing and finding her liberation. In this, it's she's finding herself here. No one finds themselves in the abstraction, in the art. The art becomes sort of horrifying. And I'm thinking of the narrator in SDF who talks about when he leaves the gallery, because he works in a gallery. It's not a gallery, but he works like as a functionary. And when he leaves that gallery, the people in the world become abstracted. They become diffracted. They become broken into component parts. And he says something like, "Oh, being in that gallery is having an actually like a horrible effect on me." Something to that. So that's right. Because
he's working in an abstract gallery.
Right, he's working in a gallery where they're hanging abstract art. They're hanging abstract art, but then he's becoming. But then it's having almost like a dissociative effect on him.
Yeah, that's right.
And there's also this image of, I mean, or in one of the other stories where a mother is playing Scrabble with her son, and the letters are sort of creating this like weird, the combination of letters is making him feel anxious. And in this story, there's someone typing words on a typewriter. And there's something sickening about the materiality of language. And I don't even know what my question is, but can you talk a little bit about do you even know? I mean, I assume this was conscious because it keeps showing up in the book, but maybe it's not.
No, well, shit. You know, now that you said that, wow, I didn't even think about the Scrabble. I did not make the connection, David. So I
That's it,
but
baby.
I'm still taking credit. I'm still taking credit.
Take credit for all of it. Why not?
But yeah. Well, you know, speaking so specifically about words and language and how if the word refracting, I don't know if that's the right word for it, where things get jumbled and he's seeing the typewriter keys. I mean, one of the stories is called ASDF, which I got off the, you know, the home keyboard. I mean, what comes to mind is my mom and she loved words. She loved the dictionary. She had a typewriter. She typed on it. She wanted to be a writer. I mean, yeah, she played Scrabble. So words were a big part of her life, and then they were a part of my life. I should say that she wanted to be a writer, and did not succeed. She worked as a secretary her whole life. She was, you know, on a typewriter her whole life. So, I mean, the fact that you point out that those two different stories involved words, I mean, the first thing I'm just thinking about is how it's probably infused in my bones from my, you know, childhood experiences. I think I'm more in tune to the fact of how these narrators are relating to art. I think there's art. I don't know. I was gonna say there's art in almost every story. Probably not. Not every story has art, but a bunch of them have art, and it figures into it. And it plagues them. It's not necessarily a liberating force. It's sort of
what's so interesting to me.
Yeah.
Like someone could have an epiphany smoking crack, but
Right.
doing their art is completely useless. Like it's almost like malignant, and that is what's so fascinating.
That's right. That's right.
It's really interesting. It's a very weird thing for artists to be so suspicious of art in their work.
Hey, by the way, I want to bring up something about Mr. Montgomery, because I just thought of this. That he's, you know, he said he broke your heart, but he's also creepy. And you know, if we were going to talk about his so-called politics, I wouldn't say I necessarily agree with those politics. You know, I mean, in this society, people go to hangings. That's what they do. Just parenthetically, I was raised in the Socialist Workers' Party. I was fringe left, for the folks out there who don't know, fringe left-wing organization. We thought there was going to be a revolution, you know, that it was going to, in my lifetime, I thought by the time I was 18 years old, there was going to be a working class revolution in the United States. But I was taught not to see depth in people, to see people as types, and especially people I didn't agree with. If we didn't agree with you, you became a type. Well, actually, everybody was a type. Everybody was a type. There were the oppressors, there were the victims, the workers, the bosses. So everybody was a type. So just thinking about the story I read, and again, this is just a digression, just thinking about that in relation to sort of the ethos that I was raised with, which is not to see the contradictions in people, the complexities in people. And that I'm just happy that you said you found him tender or whatever, that there are these tender moments. I mean, he loves the little boy that he's with, and he's also taking him to a hanging, and he believes in hangings. So I think I kind of like relish those kinds of moments when I can get into these kind of complicated characters that might not be what we would call likable, but that we can find sort of their humanity in them.
But you know he's a broken man, and you know that he's indoctrinating this young boy to be what he was indoctrinated to be, and that he's broken, and that he's sentimental, and that his penchant for brutality is perfectly compatible with his sentimentality, because that's how it goes. That's how it goes. But the story is not sentimental,
right?
But his sentimentality touched me because I could sense his brokenness. That's how I felt about that character. Okay, I have one more question, and then I want to go to the Q&A. if people have questions.
I want to
But
ask
I wanted
you,
to,
but
oh my God, but I'm supposed to ask you things. Okay, ask me.
no, but this is my night. This is what, no, but I
Yeah,
just,
it's true, it's your night.
listen, you've written a memoir. Here we go. You've written this memoir, and you've also written many great plays. And I probably shouldn't be doing this because now I'm putting the spotlight on you, and my agent's going to be annoyed. He's going to say, "Never give up the spot." But David, can you just, I don't know, in a minute or so, and maybe it's not easy or possible, like when you approach the different genres, what are you thinking? Like when you write a play, how does that differ? What is your approach? Here, I'm going to try to articulate this. What is your aesthetic approach to a memoir versus, or to prose? Fuck, I don't even know if memoir is important. Prose versus play. What are you drawing from? What are you thinking about when structurally, when you're going in? Play, you've only got dialogue, and you've got, forgive me, I mean dialogue and some stage directions to work with.
That's it, yeah.
Right. Okay, good. I'm glad I'm not being so, yeah, right.
No, it's a totally different
and then by the way, and that was always what limited me about plays. I couldn't figure out how to tell a story with just that. I didn't know how to do that. And prose always felt very liberating for me, because I was like, oh my God, I can just say everything. I can be everything.
Prose has interiority. Prose, you get interiority. And in theater,
you said
actors,
interiority?
Yeah, interiority.
Yeah.
That's the thing that doesn't exist in. So that was the weird thing when I wrote my memoir. I was like, I'd write these scenes, and like someone would go, shut the hell up and smack them. And then I move chapter 2. And like there was no, because that's what I'm used to in a play, right? But in a book, if someone smacks someone, you have, okay, then there's a response, like what's happening inside of the other person. And so that was the thing that was unnatural to me. And I was like, is this what I'm supposed to do? Because I felt this like weird, elided, truncated thing that I was doing. And I was like, what is it? So for me, to answer your question, I don't want to go on about this, but my process was really like opening myself up to like what a book's supposed to feel like, and just sort of keeping that open question, and then going, here are my impulses. Does this match what I think a book is supposed to feel like? And it was a heuristic that went on and on and on for years and years, because I really didn't know what I was doing, and no one at my publishing house was helping me. So when you
write a play, do you feel like you know what you're doing when you write a play?
No, but I know more. I know what I'm doing more. I never know what I'm doing. I think if you know what you're doing, you're just dead in the water, right? That's just like horrible. Like you have to be on the razor's edge when you just don't know what's happening, but you have to know a little. You have to know a little, because if you don't know anything, you're also dead in the water. But you have to so you have to keep that tension alive inside yourself, right? I don't know.
No, because when I write a story, I go, I think you just said it perfectly. When I write a story, I go in there with confidence. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Invariably 3 pages in, I'm like, I'm lost. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't think I know how to write a short story. It feels like every time I write a short story, I'm trying to figure out how to write a short story.
It's a very strange, it's hard to describe a process. I was saying to my friend the other day, it's like, because I'm working on something right now, and it's like, I feel like I'm creating a crossword puzzle, and I'm making the cells and like the little black areas, but then I'm also trying to solve the crossword puzzle as I'm writing the crossword puzzle. And then I'm changing the way the crossword puzzle is shaped to fit the clues that I have. It's a very weird bananas, left brain, right brain mashup. And it's so hard to talk about because it's
the thing you're working on now is a play?
No, right now I'm doing a television pilot. That's still hard.
Okay. Yeah. But still a script.
Yeah, still a script. It's still hard.
Okay.
Okay, do we have a question?
Let's
see.
We
have one question. Wow. Okay.
All right.
I'm going to read it. This is from Jennifer. She says, thank you.
Hi, Jennifer.
And she says your name. I have a question for you. Do you know the story content before writing, or do you find the story by writing starting from a particular event?
But say it one more time, because I love this. But give it to me one more time.
She says,
first, thanks you. Just click on the damn thing and see it, Jennifer.
No, but I want to read it.
Okay, read it.
Do you know the story content before writing, or do you find the story by writing starting from a particular event? It's kind of what
starting from a particular event.
Yeah.
I think it's both, and I think it depends, and I think I have an idea usually when I'm starting out that I go, here's what I want to portray. I'm going to portray this thing, this point in time, this month in this narrator's life, character's life. Sometimes I know at least the opening, which is great. If I can at least get the opening and go, here's how we're going to start. By the way, the openings take a really long time. I'm not just talking about the opening sentence, opening paragraph. I mean, when I was talking to David earlier, it was like, I've got to get in fast. I've got to give, the way I write is I try to give the reader enough information to get them up to speed about what the world is. But the key is also not to make it look like I'm just doing an information dump, that it's somehow it's coming through organically. And by the time you turn the page, you, the reader, realize, oh, I'm in the world. So sometimes there's an event, and then I've got to say, okay, I've got event number one. Where do I go from there? If I know what the finish line is, I then know, okay, I've got to get, I don't know, in the case I'm writing 6,000 words, I've got to get 6 more scenes. I've got, it's like lily pads. I've got opening scene, and if I know last scene, then I've got to find 6 scenes that'll somehow get me there. Some moment of epiphany somewhere through. I don't know if epiphany is the right word. Maybe that's cliche. I'm not sure. Something's got to happen, or the reader's got to expect something to happen, and maybe it doesn't, but at least we're going towards something. So I think a lot of times I'm motivated, Jennifer, just to answer the question, I think a lot of times I'm motivated by trying to say something or just trying to portray a feeling or an idea. And then I've got to figure out how to make that flesh. And then I'll go back to what I said earlier, is we're always trying to figure it out as we go. It's like every story, it's like, what the hell are we going to do?
I still don't understand how you wrote this book, but anyways. All right, I want to ask you a question. And people, feel free to pipe in if you want to ask, say a question. I want to talk to you about the title. What do you think makes this book uniquely American for you? Like, I mean, when I was listening to you read, I was like, oh, I felt nauseated by just the milkshakes and the ribs. And I was like, and there are these banal, there are all these banal American anchors that go through it. Seinfeld and this and that.
I love it all. Yes.
Right. But sort of like, but is there something like, why is the estrangement inside of it a uniquely American one for you? Or is it? Like, what does it even mean to be American? Like, what is it? The whole category is so broken.
See, now we're getting, this is getting deep. I mean, how much, what are we going to go? We're going to go into overtime? I mean, this is
we have time.
Nick, can we go over? Listen, I think first of all, I think there's a double meaning in the title. It's estranged from one's country, the feeling of being estranged in society. I would say, as evident by the story, the excerpt that I read. It's not always as overt as that, but I think that there's that's running through. There's also one's internal estrangement. In the case of some of these stories, it's familial estrangement. It's a personal estrangement. It's an American's estrangement. For me, David, it's always, I don't think I've ever said this out loud. I don't think I've ever articulated, but I think it's always been very radical for me when I write something and I'm allowed not to be someone of Middle Eastern descent. I still can't believe I'm allowed that prose allows me to do that. And so when I talk about being an actor, it sucked, because I mean, I was only going out for roles that were Middle Eastern or Indian, and they were never good roles. I mean, they were all stereotypes. They were, and I'm not exaggerating here. It's like I went out for many, many auditions, talking about like commercial auditions or film auditions. It was always for like deli owner or taxi cab driver, and you know, and I would get to the audition and I'd go, but you know, you can tell I don't have an accent. I'm not saying I said this out loud, but I was hoping that they'd see me for more like a full-bodied person, not just ethnicity. They only wanted ethnicity. They're looking for ethnicity, and it was humiliating and it was frustrating, and I felt like I couldn't. Here, I'm gonna blame this for why I actually wasn't I mean, I don't think I was a very good actor either, but I also couldn't apply my craft because I wasn't getting opportunities to do it. Okay, all of that to say, when I write fiction and nonfiction, I can write about whatever I want. I've never written a story where an editor has come back and said, hey, but there's nobody who's of Iranian descent in here, or what's like I sometimes give the characters American names and no one's ever asked me to change, so I'm able to express everything. So for me, it's a radical act to be able to say American Estrangement, that I'm writing as an American. Ethnicity does not play a role in this, except really for the last story. I mean, there's a few mentions of race. So yeah, I mean, I think the estrangement is working on a bunch of different levels. And it's also like, and it's not that this is stated out loud in the book, but there's also the feeling of like one's emotional and psychological makeup also informs how they see the world, what they're seeing in the world, how alienated they might be. If you're feeling sort of alienated on a personal level, again, I'm going back to my childhood, my mother's depression. She was clinically depressed and she saw the world through a clinically depressed person's eyes, which was that it was a horrible place, society was bad. And I'm not saying there aren't problems, but the intensity of what she felt, the desire for literal violence there was going to be this tumult, this upheaval, a lot of that, and I didn't know this as a child, but a lot of that was based on her psychological makeup, and she was seeing the world that way. So I see we got some other questions. Somebody else was asking about
So someone
ask away.
First of all, that was
hard.
I have so many things I want to talk to you about. I'm going to ask you later.
I'm
just going to talk to you later.
Yeah. Right.
I'm just going to talk to you later. Okay. How did you decide the order of the stories for the book?
Good question. Good question. Oh, geez. I think one of the things I'm looking for in the book is that and maybe this is going back to sort of a musical analogy, but like where we don't, I was trying to break up stories that might be similar either in content or tone. So I didn't want to follow a story with a too similar story. So that was part of the idea of it. I wanted to end, the final story is called A Beginner's Guide to Estrangement. It's not called American Estrangement, Beginner's Guide to Estrangement. I just kind of wanted to end on that. Because I think that speaks more directly to what the title is, in a more of a, going back to the literal figurative idea, speaks more to sort of a literal idea of what the title is about. But I wanted to save that for the end. And I started it with, that opening line that I read, whatever, the first time I smoked crack cocaine, that's the opening story. I just said, well, that's one hell of an opening line. Let's just hit the reader in the head with that. Let's start with that. They won't be able to look away. They won't be able to look away from that line. So that was some of the thinking behind the structure.
That's a really good question. Another anonymous attendee asks,
anonymous,
right? Yeah, there's some people who don't want to be known.
We've got trolls.
I can totally relate. No, I can relate. All right. They say, does writing good dialogue come naturally to you?
Oh, wow. Oh, shit. Oh, I like, so if I may, yes, I think so. And thank you for the compliment. I think you're giving, yes. Well, first of all, I don't use a lot of dialogue, so that makes it easy. The kind of dialogue I write, which I think you'd be hard pressed to find any dialogue in this book that's 2 sentences in a row. I use dialogue as like a spice. Here's what I'm thinking of. I'm like imagining a chef who's like got the spice thing and he just throws the spice. Like, I just want to sprinkle it on a little bit just so that you can hear the voice break. Sometimes I use it just to break up narration, exposition. Let's get a little bit of action. You can get the action through the dialogue. So I also I love cliches. I like I put cliches in dialogue because otherwise then you think I'm just a cliche, right? So I like having characters who say things that are cliche. I'm also very aware that characters generally do not say, they're not articulate. Human beings are not articulate. We're not necessarily saying exactly how we're feeling inside. We're saying something that could contradict actually the truth of what's inside of us. So all of that is what I'm putting in the dialogue. That does come easy to me. If we want to talk about plays, I don't know. I had a harder time with dialogue in plays because, David, I don't know how to convey information. I don't know how to convey information
through dialogue.
Through dialogue in a play.
It's a totally different animal because I had the hardest time writing dialogue in my book Memoir. I felt like a freak. I was like, it felt so corseted. I just was like, ugh, like get me out of these sentences. I just need to like have people talk. And I thought it was so strange. And everyone kept saying, but you're a playwright, can't you just write dialogue? I mean, that's what my editor said. And I was like, it's just a completely different thing. Because in a play, you're just free and the characters can just go. But the dialogue is like one component part of many things happening when you're working in prose, and it takes on a different role. So I understand why you make the distinction.
I'm going to give you another plug. You're teaching at Hunter, you're teaching playwriting at Hunter grad this semester.
I am.
I would love to audit that class. I'm going to audit that class, figure out a way. No, because this is really, this is illuminating for me, because when we only got like a minute, but because you're saying with dialogue, you said they can just go in a play, but they're trying to convey, they have to be conveying things.
They do.
All background. If the characters have a background story, that's all got to come through dialogue.
Right. But the thing is, for me, like, it's like sort of doing jazz. So I just let my characters do whatever they're going to do. And then I sculpt it retroactively. I go back and plant something here. Oh, okay, I'm going to plant this here. I start shaping it and angling things after the fact, but I let them go in the beginning. And that's the pleasure of it for me, of just listening to voices going and going, and the rhythmic aspect of it, because my rhythms are so particular. And so some people say stylized. I think they're sort of hypernaturalistic, but like, that's not what you're looking for when you open up a book of short stories for, long form prose or whatever.
Because what I love about prose is that I don't have to use dialogue, that everything can come through with exposition. So if there's a backstory, it doesn't need to be conveyed through a character's mouth.
Right.
I can just convey it. And then, so that for me was liberating. I don't think I was ever able to figure out how to do it in plays. I don't think I was able. And it was interesting because you said when they told you about, your editor was like, what did you say your editor said about?
Why can't you just write dialogue? You're a playwright. Like,
that's right. My editor, when I wrote my memoir, said it's interesting because when I wrote my memoir, had been working on plays for many years. She said it's interesting that as a playwright, you don't have much dialogue in your memoir. And I thought that was interesting. And I realized, yeah, and I'm so glad I don't have to use it, because I don't know how to use it. I wouldn't want to use it. I'm glad I don't have to. So.
But one of the things that's so strong about your writing is the dreamy interiority of the characters who are sort of like lost to themselves, or can't quite locate themselves. Some of them are just like, they're like helium balloons. You feel like they could just float out of the stories, but they don't. They're anchored in the story. But that is coming from your prose.
Do you feel like that's how human beings are? That human beings can't locate themselves? Or do you feel like there's degrees to that?
Yeah, there's degrees. I mean, we're moving targets. Yeah. Some people are really completely oblivious, and some people are less oblivious, but none of us can quite. It's like, there's some philosopher said, it's like an eye seeing itself. It's like a mouth kissing itself. And I can't remember who talked about that, but it's like, we cannot, it's physically impossible. It's psychically impossible to locate the self all the time in all of our hiding spots, because we keep finding, finding.
And you know what the answer to that is? That's why God made therapists.
I know.
I know. That's where you get the mirror held up to you. But I also find in the obliviousness, I think that's where I find comedy, that humor comes out of that, out of the cluelessness of the characters. But it's not always funny, and it's often tragic, but there is a absurd quality to characters who are not fully aware. I think for me, humor is in that. It's built into that.
And I think there's just grace in the humor. You know, there's always so much grace because we're free to be screw ups. Do you know what I mean? We're free to fail. It's the human condition. We're all gonna fail all the time.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know. Is it now we're
Nick? Where's Nick?
Powell, tell
Nick
us what to do, Powell.
Hey,
because I went over and I said I don't want to go over.
Okay.
you can finish your thought. That's fine. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, now I don't know. I got so self-conscious. I got so nervous. I don't know what else. There's so much.
Nick,
it's almost like I'm getting nervous because I have too many questions and there's so many things that you said that I wanted to respond to, and then I got nervous.
We'll have to go have a virtual drink. And by the way, I want to thank everybody in the audience for coming. I know there's some former students of mine, so thank you. It's good I wish I could see you, but I can't. Everybody is blacked out. So.
Well, yes. Well, thank you both. Yeah, thank you both so much for coming, and that kind of great conversation. It was great to listen to and all that. And we're grateful for you for both coming. And yeah, thanks.
You.
Yeah, you're
welcome. By the way, here we go.
Yes, we've got the
2 orders from Powell's tonight.
Yep,
that's right.
Definitely.
I don't have any. I don't
David's
have
book here too. David's book's here. All right. So yes, thank you. So yes, please go get Saïd's book there at powells.com. And while you're there, check out our lineup of upcoming events that we have. And yeah, thank you guys so much for everything. And yep,
thank
have
you,
a nice.
Thanks, Powell's.
Absolutely. Good night, everyone.
Bye. Good night.